And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to GZ Truth News. We have our special guest, Dr. Jim Fetzer. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Things are get really crazy, left, right, and center. Tell us all what's new with you and what are the updates, Jim?
Well, what's most important in terms of the developments in Gaza, it's increasingly evident that the October 7th attack was, at the minimum, allowed to happen. We even have footage of IDF Apache helicopters shooting Jews and other tourists at the concert to run up the total so they could use Hamas as a scapegoat to justify the massive onslaught, really, truly genocide of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. It was a manufactured crisis of the type classically known as a false flag. It turns out, however, that Hamas is acquitting itself rather well in its defense, in spite of a siege being imposed, cutting off water, food, fuel, and electricity. Hamas has been commendably standing up. It appears 5,000 American troops, Delta Force, were used in an initial ground attack on Gaza, but they were repulsed. They were shot up so badly that even Israeli television was expressing disappointment at the abject failure, after which they decided upon the Dresden strategy, namely to bomb Gaza into oblivion. Now, bear in mind that the Israelis would be happy with a second state if it were located in Jordan, for example, or in the Sinai Desert. Ultimately, the final solution from the Israeli perspective would be to load all the Palestinians aboard a ship, float it out to sea, and sink it. That's how they view. This is deeply set in Talmudic versions of Judaism. There are Jews who are opposed to genocide. They had a massive protest at Grand Central Terminal about 2 weeks ago. They're utterly sincere, but those who are in charge are completely the opposite persuasion. That includes, of course, Bibi Netanyahu, but his Minister of Defense, the head of the Israeli military. They have concocted an exaggerated enemy, and now they propose to decimate it utterly ruthlessly, including women, children, and the elderly. According to these Israeli leaders, there are no innocents in Palestine, no innocents in Gaza, no innocents in the West Bank, no matter how ridiculous that may be. What they're doing, therefore, is blatantly violating international law, the Hague Convention against the wanton destruction of property, the Geneva Convention against punishing anyone for a crime they did not personally commit. This is known as collective punishment. It is a violation of human rights, but the Israelis don't care. They don't care. Those are man's laws. They claim to be responding to a higher authority, God's law, and believe that as a chosen people, God has entitled them to secure the promised land and vanquish anyone else, any non-Jew, from that territory. Absolutely. And if you consult the Old Testament, for example, you find the God of the Old Testament is very different from the God of the New. He's a God of vengeance, a God of retribution. He engages or encourages slaughters and genocides right and left. Also, this virulent form of Judaism holds Christianity in contempt. They took pride in the crucifixion of Christ and believe they're entitled to slaughter Christians with impunity. That is God's will. And the world has to realize this is a situation we're up against, because Christians and their religion are so very different. They're a God of compassion, a God of mercy, a God of love. It's very difficult for Christians to even envision, even to imagine the mindset of the Jews who despise Christians and want to kill them. It's a fact, alas. If you belong to this virulent Zionist version, the Talmudic version of Judaism, I agree that not all Jews adhere to those beliefs or want to kill Christians. In my life, some of my closest friends have been Jewish. My best friend in college, my roommate for years, Michael Boardman was Jewish. Mike is, alas, now passed on to greener pastures. I had a dear friend, Ricka White, in Lexington. She was my neighbor, a dear, confident friend. She was Jewish. The head of my department, when I was hired as full professor with tenure on the Duluth campus of the University of Minnesota, Lauren Lemansky, was Jewish. Indeed, one of the interesting conversations we had was about differences between Christianity and Judaism, where we observed that Christians have a lot of constraints on sex, but no constraints on food, whereas in Judaism, there are constraints on food, but no constraints on sex. An insightful observation from a man who knew whereof he spoke. Now, Hamas has adopted a sophisticated version of a rocket-propelled grenade that works in two stages. It drills a hole in the vehicles, the armored vehicles it's attacking, and allows the explosion to enter and destroy the vehicle. 88 Israeli armored vehicles have been taken out by Hamas. That's 23% of the 383 that have been destroyed in the past 5 days alone. This is extremely important and significant. Now, since imposing the siege on the 9th, cutting off fuel, electricity, and communication capacity thereby, what they have done is to immediately bring about the death of a lot of infants who were in incubators and hospitals. They died right off the bat because the incubators could not continue to function. Everyone needs to understand the rule of 3, that a human being can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. We're approaching the point now where food is running out in Gaza. The situation is getting desperate. But even more, so what we're talking about is genocide by starvation. Israel's bombing operations have exhausted the food supply in Gaza. The situation is desperate. It also appears to me they're using weather warfare, that heavy rain is falling on Gaza. Think of those who are caught in the rubble. They don't have any shelter. They may drown to death. Think of the amount of water that could flood the underground tunnels that are the base of Hamas operation. I'm convinced this is not a naturally occurring weather phenomenon, but rather has been manipulated. Not only that, but we have now the Al-Shifa hospital being destroyed. They can no longer handle any patients. The Israelis are so brutal in what they are about that they're going to kill any opportunity to treat those who have suffered from their bombing or from their other assaults. Absolutely stunning. Now, it's rather fascinating. That turns out there is a command bunker underneath the hospital, and the Israelis know it's there because the Israelis built it. I mean, this is rather fascinating. This is like a non-secret secret. The idea one of Hamas main command bunkers is located beneath Sharif Hospital in Gaza City is one of the worst kept secrets of the Gaza war. So why aren't reporters in Gaza ferreting it out? The precise location of a large underground bunker equipped with sophisticated communication equipment, housing some of the leadership of a major terrorist organization called here. But remember, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I'm all with Hamas, with the Palestinians, in my opinion. Anyone who looks at the situation objectively would agree we are all Palestinians today, would recognize that this is they'd have a world-class scoop if they were exposed the underground bunker equipped with sophisticated communication equipment. So why isn't the fact that Hamas uses Sharif Hospital as a command post making headlines? In part, it's because the location is so unsecret that Hamas regularly meets with reporters there. On July 15th, for example, William Booth of the Washington Post wrote, hospital has become a de facto headquarters for Hamas leaders who can be seen in the hallways and offices. Back in 2006, PBS even aired a documentary showing how gunmen roam the halls of the hospital, intimidate the staff, deny them access to protected locations where the camera crew was obviously kept from filming. Yet the confirmation of Hamas is using Gaza's biggest hospital as its de facto headquarters was made in the last sentence of the 8th paragraph of Boo's story, which would appear to be the kind of rookie mistake known in journalism as burying the lead. So,
Bless you.
So we thank you. We have a lot going on here that's not being reported to the American people. Meanwhile, we have Mike King giving a very nice overview in just about 6 minutes. I want to share with you of how Israel has become oppressed by the Jews coming in after the Balfour Agreement. And by the way, let me add, in the Balfour Declaration, it states specifically that the indigenous population must be respected. They must not be subject to harm. But what the Israelis have been doing is precisely the opposite. Check this out, Mike King.
The left is laughing at Americans tonight. Their newest con involves convincing you that spending more taxpayer money will lower.
Mike King, of course, is the editor and author of the Anti-New York Times. Here's his mini historical review. Very nicely done.
Current developments in the Middle East offer us a good teachable moment for a chronological crash course, 10-point summary of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Know these few key points, and you'll be way ahead of most people when it comes to understanding this seemingly complex, but actually quite simple historical topic. We begin in 70 AD. Having had enough of Jewish intrigue, agitation, and ambush attacks upon their soldiers, the Romans sack Jerusalem and expel the surviving rebellious Babylonian Jews from their homeland province of Judea. The scattered remnants settle throughout the Middle East, Southern Europe, and North Africa. The 700s, Jewish rabbis convert the ruling class of the pagan Khazarian Empire, based mainly in what is today Ukraine and southwest Russia. The masses of this Near Asian people, today acknowledged as the Ashkenazim supermajority of Jews, soon follows. The mass conversion greatly enhances the ranks of what had been a dying Judaism. These new Jews, along with other North African converts known as Sephardics, will remain true to their religion and people long after the Russian Empire busts up the Khazarian Empire in the 960s. 1000 through the 1800s. Throughout the Middle Ages and beyond, the troublesome wandering Khazars and olive-skinned Sephardic Jews are expelled from over 100 kingdoms or nations, including major states such as England 2 times, France, Spain, and Portugal, and they are persecuted in many others. Prussia, Russia, Poland, Austria, etc. The usual complaints against them include coin clipping, usurious money lending, undue influence in the affairs of state, disrespect for Christianity, hostility toward their hosts, sacrificial murders of Christian children, and poisoning of wells. The late 1800s, Khazarian Zionists, with no ancestral link whatsoever to the Jews of Roman Empire times, begin a movement to establish a Jewish homeland in Arab-dominated Palestine, which at this time is under the jurisdiction of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. The Zionist movement's nominal leader is Theodor Herzl, but the real bosses are the men of the infamous House of Rothschild. 1890 to 1914, Over a period of about 15 years, and with the permission of Turkey, the advance guard of European Jewry, totaling no more than 40,000, arrive and settle, mainly as farmers, in Palestine. Neither the Turks nor the local Arabs seem to understand that this low-level aliyah, as it was called, represents, by design, the camel's nose under the tent. 1917, as the long, pre-planned Great War to restructure the world breaks down into a stalemate, but with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey holding the advantage, the opportunistic Zionist leaders approach the British with a dirty deal. The scheme, which later took form in the 1917 Balfour Declaration, promises that the Zionists, who own American President Woodrow Wilson, will bring the mighty United States into the war on Britain's side. The price which Britain must pay is to take over Palestine from Turkey after the war and allow the Jews of Europe to migrate there in large numbers in preparation for an eventual Jewish state. Between the World Wars, 1919 and 1939, Jews from Europe flood into British-ruled Palestine over the objections of the Arab majority, who now see what the game is. But immigration to Palestine is not enough. The Zionists want a sovereign nation for themselves. Post-World War II years, 1945 to 1948, using the pretext of Jewish suffering during the World War II, the so-called Holocaust, the Zionist desire for an actual nation turns into Zionist demands, backed up by murderous acts of terror against both the British rulers and the Arab locals. Palestine is partitioned by the United Nations in 1947, and Israel is declared as a state in 1948. The United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union are quick to recognize the new nation. 1948 to 1967, Arab wars against aggressor Israel and domestic uprisings among Palestinians not only failed to dislodge the new American armed criminal state, but result in Israel acquiring more and more territory, the ultimate goal being a major expansion of Greater Israel into Syria, Iraq, and even Egypt. So complete is Israel's dominance over the Middle East policy of the United States that the 1967 false flag attempted sinking of the USS Liberty, killing 34 U.S. sailors and injuring 171, goes unreported in the U.S. media. 9/11, 2001. Though the Zionist faction of international Jewry is often at odds with the global Marxist faction, after 30 years of staging false flag terror incidents designed to ensnare the U.S. in the region, both elements worked together to stage the false flag attacks of 9/11. The purpose of 9/11 was to blame the Muslims and launch endless wars of expansion in both the Middle East and Central Asia. And that, boys and girls, in a nutshell, is the untold story of the Israeli-Palestine conflict, a sad tale of how a quote-unquote desert, which was actually populated by 700,000 Arabs and hardly any Jews at all, has, over the course of just a little more than 1 century, transitioned from Palestine into the state of Israel, populated mainly by European Khazarians, whose ancestors, incredibly, had never even set foot in the Syria-Palestina of Roman times. And why exactly is this true story an untold story? It's because members of a certain ethnic group have long dominated American media, finance, Hollywood, book publishing, politics, and academia. And that is the story of the Israel-Palestine complex.
I think Mike King does a wonderful job with that. He's doing everything he can to get the truth out about it. 9/11, of course, is really crucial. Paul Craig Roberts has suggested what's going on here now with Hamas and Israel is an extension of 9/11. Those who have followed understand that this was an Israeli op. Bibi Netanyahu and Ehud Olmert, another prime minister of Israel in the late 1980s, around the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, which formally took place in 1991, sought to devise a plan that would draw U.S. forces into the Middle East to take out the modern Arab states that served as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the entire region, beginning with Libya and Iraq, but eventuating with Syria and Iran. They were successful with regard to most of their ambitious project, but were brought to a halt in Syria by the intervention of Russian and Iranian forces at the request of the democratically elected president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. They want to complete that project now. Thus, one of the features taking place is attacks on U.S. bases in Syria that are being blamed on Iran. Syria is a battlefield on multiple grounds. And if they can draw the U.S. in again, just as they already have, with 5,000 troops involved in a ground assault on Gaza, then they hope they can go all the way with the USA by having America attack Iran, which is tragic to contemplate for the reason that Iran may be the most peace-loving nation in the world, having not launched a war of aggression against any other state since 1775. Just to put that in historical perspective, the Constitution was ratified in 1777. The first president, George Washington, was elected in 1789. So for longer than the United States has existed as a constitutional republic, Iran has not launched a war of aggression against any other state. I wish that could be said of the United States, sad to say. In any case, Hamas is acquitting itself in an admirable fashion, where Israeli war crimes are following a U.S. blueprint. Thus, Israel's crimes in Gaza and the propaganda by which it justifies them are based on the weak and incorrect interpretation of the Geneva Conventions the U.S. has relied upon throughout its recent wars. We have, and this is from Nation of Change, two authors, we have both been reporting on and protesting against U.S. war crimes for many years, and against identical crimes committed by U.S. allies and proxies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. Illegal use of military force to try to remove enemy governments or regimes, hostile military occupations, disproportionate military violence justified by claims of terrorism, the bombing and killing of civilians, and the mass destruction of whole cities. Most Americans share a general aversion to war, but tend to accept this militarized foreign policy because we are tragically susceptible to propaganda, the machinery of public manipulation that works hand in hand with the machinery of killing to justify otherwise unthinkable horrors. The process of manufacturing consent works in a number of ways. One of the most effective forms of propaganda is silence, simply not reporting on and certainly not showing us what war is really doing to the people, whose homes and communities have been turned into America's latest battlefield. The most devastating campaign the U.S. military has waged in recent years dropped over 100,000 bombs on missiles on Mosul in Iraq, Raqqa in Syria, and other areas occupied by ISIS or Daesh. An Iraqi Kurdish intelligence report estimated that more than 40,000 civilians were killed in Mosul alone, while Raqqa was even more totally devastated. The shelling of Raqqa was the heaviest U.S. military bombardment since the Vietnam War, yet it was barely reported by the U.S. corporate media. A recent New York Times article about the traumatic brain injuries and PTSD suffered by U.S. artillerymen operating 155 howitzers each of which had fired up to 10,000 shells into Ragai, was appropriately titled A Secret War, Strange New Wounds and Silence from the Pentagon. One of the most stunning aspects of what's going on today is that we have television and video from the scene of a genocide. This has never happened before in history, so that the whole world can see what's going on in Israel today, and the whole world is aghast. The situation is utterly stunning, where President Erdogan of Turkey has now cut off gas and oil to Israel. Yemen, the Houthis have already declared war on Israel. Algeria, which has the second most formidable military in Africa after Egypt, the parliament has already passed a resolution only waiting for the president to declare it. The motives are completely impure, because it turns out there are vast gas and oil reserves off the coast of Gaza that belong to the Gazans, belong to the Palestinians. But Bibi Netanyahu is already offering leases to international oil companies, notwithstanding they don't belong to Israel, in anticipation of annexing the Gazan territory as a part of Israel, where he's even made public statements showing maps that have no Gaza, no West Bank visible. Plus, there's a desire to build a new canal going directly through Gaza, the Ben Gurion Canal, that's going to reap hundreds of billions in benefits for Israel and give it additional military advantages. Meanwhile, the Indonesian president has urged Biden to help end the Gaza atrocities, but he's not going to do it. Speaker Johnson of the House calls the idea of a ceasefire outrageous at a pro-Israel rally. The public in this case is way ahead of its political leaders. The public sees genocide for what it truly is, the mass slaughter of innocent people. The public does not like it. Over 400 U.S. officials even have signed a letter criticizing Biden's Israel policy. And I am optimistic that, in fact, between economic and public political pressure, that Israel is not going to be allowed to get away with it. Let me make two crucial points about how Israel's standing in the community and the world community has been adversely affected here. Number one, Netanyahu, I believe, allowed Hamas to take more territory in a single day than the Ukrainian army had taken in 4 months of its misconceived counteroffensive. And, of course, the IDF itself is participating in slaughter to run up the numbers. But the fact is, it shattered the illusion of Israeli invulnerability. Israel was supposed to be such a secure state, nothing like this could ever happen. That illusion has been permanently shattered. The other is a victimhood card that has been played over and over again since fabricating and exaggerating the so-called Holocaust story, where we know from the International Committee of the Red Cross, which was keeping copious detailed records on every inmate, their age, their sex, their ethnicity, their religion, their cause of death, recalibrating the total in 1993, a total from all camps combined was 296,081, none of whom died from being put to death in a gas chamber. The Israelis have been very clever in stretching the meaning of anti-Semitism to go far removed from what it originally meant, namely attacking someone because they were Jewish for being Jewish, to any criticism of Israel whatsoever. And we have political lunatics like Nikki Haley and Lindsey Graham calling for an all-out attack on Hamas, an all-out attack on the Palestinian stuff, finish them off and to do the job. I believe that, notwithstanding American support, and we have brought 4 carrier groups to the vicinity and even a nuclear submarine, They are not going to get away with it. And I foresee a crucial role by Turkey here. Having taken the initiative in cutting off gas and oil, you may anticipate Biden is going to try to compensate with gas and oil from America. But remember, he came in as the energy opposite president. His first act in office was cancel the XL pipeline to rescind leases on public land. He has made America very weak from the point of view of energy. And if he does, as I predict he will do, the price of gasoline is going to soar. It's going to further damage his standing in the American public eye, though it could hardly be lower than it is now. And we all must bear in mind the Democrat Party has the right, if it should lose its preferred candidate, to nominate anyone it wants, especially after the primaries and caucuses have taken place. I predict with very high confidence Biden is not going to be on the ticket in 2024. He's going to be replaced by Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and possibly, and I do believe this was the original plan, before the events at Martha's Vineyard involving the death of the chef of the Obamas took place, Michelle is to be his running mate, where we'll discover if the American people like the idea of voting for a vice presidential candidate who is a man with breast implants and a huge shaving bill. America last is disgracing itself with all-out support for Israel. Both China and Russia have declared themselves in favor of a Palestinian state. I believe if military action goes forward, that Russia in particular will not be able to stand by, and that we're going to spin into a third world war. I wish I could tell you things are going in a way that leads to a positive result. Instead, I say, spend as much time as you can with your family, your friends, and people you love and care about, because we do not know how much time we have left.
Wow, very, very disturbing reports. Thank you very much, Jim. It's a very ugly situation. Seems like a lot of false flags are going on domestically and, all over the planet. And what's going on over there is it's hard to tell, and with all the rampant inflation and all the crazy stuff going on. Do you know anything about what's going on with the U.S. government, with what happened in October 15th? Today is November 15th. What were they going to do, on the default of the debt? Do you know much about that?
Well, the situation is catastrophic. Interest on the national debt has just become staggering. The United States is not a solvent nation. We have had our credit rating knocked down. This is going to have vast consequences. They'd like to move to the digital dollar. Nigeria has already rejected it. And I have no idea what happens to all kinds of fridge economy that's all done in cash transactions. If they go to digital currency, it's going to be a form of enslavement, like the 15-minute cities. Think about it. The very idea of not being able to travel more than 15 minutes away from your home without permission means you'd then be living in an open-air prison camp. I think this is enhanced by electric vehicles, which have a very limited range. They're doing their best to destroy traditional modes of energy, gas, oil, that make a difference here to our not only energy independence, but the freedom of each of us as citizens with the mobility to travel wherever we might like. And as the attack on freedom and democracy is simply overwhelming. The world has never confronted such a threat, and we Americans, alas, are especially at risk of losing everything for which we have worked our entire lives, sacrificed our time and effort to defend a once great nation, which is now turning into a flimsy shadow of its former self, where crime is allowed to run openly, where millions are pouring across our borders, where we have lost our financial integrity. Some would say long since. The situation is about as deplorable as that could be, my friend. Sad to say.
It really is. And, but we can never give up hope. And, we just got to stay our best to stay informed and keep at it, because they'll do their best. And I'd like to think that this is the cabal's last breath of trying to do what they're doing. And, too many people are waking up to their nefarious doings. So hopefully that comes to an end soon. Can I ask you what's up with your court case? What's the update
Well,
on that?
I'm in the Wisconsin Supreme Court over the taking of my book, which was in violation of the statutes and protocols for a proper taking. The book was taken to be destroyed. It should have gone to a receiver who would then oversee the use of the book to pay off the judgment against me. But because the recipient, the plaintiff, had no interest in using it for that purpose, it was an improper taking. Plus, it entailed a reversal of his position in the court. He was judicially estoppeled from doing that. I'm also in the Court of Appeals over a garnishment that was done in gross violation of my and my wife's rights, where they are treating money in a designated account for interest or receipts from a retirement account as though it were ordinary money, where they even included her half of our tax returns as though they belonged to me, money that had been sent to her specifically, and reimbursements I'd made of retirement account money that were clearly for that purpose, all of which was wrong. The question becomes whether the courts of Wisconsin are going to rise to the level of enforcing the laws of Wisconsin. I wish I could tell you I were optimistic, but based upon my past experience, they may continue to compromise the rights of the citizens of Wisconsin, which are taking place on an enormous scale across the entire nation. Again, I say very tragically, but affecting many, many decent, hardworking, law-abiding citizens today.
It truly is sad. It did, and hopefully it all turns around. Are you still doing the website Give, Send, Go?
Yes. In fact, I am. And I have a few other cards to play. And anyone who'd like to support me in my efforts, givesendgo.com/funding Fetzer. Funding Fetzer would be most welcome. I would appreciate any contributions you were to make. There's no slash at the end. It's just givesendgo.com/funding Fetzer. That's it.
Great. And then what else are you doing that you want to share? You got the
Well, I have a
websites?
new show. I have a new show on RBN. I have become the successor to Michael Rovero on RBN. So I have a show, Authentic News now, 5 days a week. Currently, it's from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. But on 4 December, it'll move up an hour. It'll be from 2 to 4 Central, 3 to 5 Eastern. I'm also continuing with my Revolution radio show Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where I'm doing interviews on a regular basis from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday Central Time, noon to 2 p.m. And all of the shows, or the vast majority, are also being posted on my BitChute channel, Jim Fetzer. And many are also posted on my Twitter @Jim Fetzer. And many articles by multiple sources are appearing on my blog at jameshfetzer.org.
Wonderful. And how do people that want to listen to the RBN radio, how do they reach you there?
Well, there actually is a listen live, but you can go to RBN and check out. Let me see if I can pull up the number because I got it here.
Great, and I'll link it to the show because a lot of people I think would be really interested in hearing you on RBN.
Yes. Let me go all the way there. Well, one of the places, I'll put it here in the link.
Great. Is it rbn.com, right?
rbn.com, yeah.
Great.
It's
They'll be able to find
Republic
you.
Broadcasting Network. Yeah. Here are also the archives. You know, say
Great.
many of those shows are on my BitChute channel, and I'll give you the link there too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for everything you do, Jim.
Oh, it's my great pleasure, and I really appreciate it. I'm glad we caught up with each other now. I've, of course, been recovering from a heart attack in February, had double bypass surgery in June. I've gone through cardiac rehab, about 60 sessions, very, very successful. I had some minor surgeries removing 3 basal cell carcinomas from my scalp, but it's all healing up, and I'm feeling quite fit and eager to remain in the fray, and I'm with you. We're going to see this
Thank
through to
God.
the end. We're going to see this through to the end. I
That's
do
right.
believe that our best hope is the leadership provided by Donald Trump. Even though he's a flawed candidate, I believe he's done good things for America. As president, he secured our border. He secured our border. He made us energy independent. He gave us a surging economy where the lowest wage earners were seeing their wages rise at the highest rate. I believe he can do it again with greater vigor and set the ship of state right. I believe in him. I encourage you to support him for a second round. But if we cannot get rid of the electronic voting machines, where Barack Obama declared them to be part of our critical infrastructure and put him under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security so they can monitor voting down to the precinct level and change the vote. If we cannot get rid of electronic voting machines and return to paper ballots and hand counts, I see no prospect of recovering control of the fate of the nation. So put pressure on everyone you can. Write your representative, get rid of electronic voting machines, stir up the pot. In my opinion, the Republicans could run Jesus Christ as their candidate and they'd still lose because the way the Democrats have the vote rigged today.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for all those reports, Jim, and we will definitely keep on at it. So God bless you. God bless this country. Thank you very much, and amen.
My great pleasure.
Stay tuned.